This essay is titled Comparing Peter Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous to G.I. Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, including meetings with remarkable men, and thus to reveal the differences of Ouspensky's philosophy with Gurdjieff's. Although there are other books by students of Gurdjieff or Ouspensky, most will agree that these two books, Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson by G.I. Gurdjieff and In Search of the Miraculous by Peter Ouspensky, are the most important in the study of Gurdjieff. Some might say that the comparison between these two books is a waste of time, since G.S.'s lectures in Search of the Miraculous are believed to be the same as Gurdjieff's teachings in Beelzebub's Tales, and thus can be used interchangeably. This is a major misunderstanding because G.S. lectures are merely preliminary thoughts of Gurdjieff that improved over time, and thus Beelzebub's Tales must prevail. Due to the fact that G.S.'s lectures are easier to understand, many often believe that these lectures are Gurdjieff's teachings, when they are not. A good example of this is the ray of creation in Ouspensky, which ends at the moon, whereas Gurdjieff's creation in BT chapter Holy Planet Purgatory relies on the evolution and involution of cosmoses. In addition, it is clear that Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson is written from the emotional depth of understanding, rather than presenting mere knowledge. This comparison of these two books not only helps to uncover the mistakes of Ouspensky followers, but also uncovers mistakes and omissions in Beelzebub's Tales itself. Sadly, those in the latter category may never be corrected because of the belief of the infallibility of famous people, such as Gurdjieff and Jesus. After all, how dare I, mere human, show there is a missing stoppander in the food octave? So the way this will be presented is that I will first show the blue, which is In Search of the Miraculous, and then I will show the green, with the corrected material from Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, with links to my essays. So here we are in Chapter 1, Ouspensky, page 21. Man is a machine. All his deeds are the results of external influences, external impressions. What is being done, and particularly what has already been done in one way, cannot be and could not have been done in any other way. Page 22. Everything is dependent on everything else. Everything is connected. Nothing is separate. So in Gurdjieff, this is talking about man is a machine. All his deeds are the results of external influences, external impressions. Rather than dwell on the negative of man as a machine, we must look at the design of the Archangel Hariton as an example of our body starship. And the description is very much like the Tipura Vinamana, with mind of photons, divided by amber, with the heart air, divided by amber, with the body and the elements. So BT 5.70. This new system was unanimously acknowledged to be the best, and very soon it was adapted for general universal service, and thereafter gradually all previous systems were entirely superseded. That system of the great angel, now Archangel Hariton, is now in use everywhere at the present day. So now, page 24 in Ouspensky. What is war? It is the results of planetary influences. Somewhere up there, two or more planets have approached too near to each other. Tension results. Everything that happens on a big scale is governed from the outside, and governed either by external combinations of influences or by general cosmic laws. And then it continues, organic life on Earth is acted upon simultaneously by influences proceeding from various sources and different worlds. Influences from planets, influences from the moon, influences from the sun, influences from the stars. All these influences act simultaneously. One influence predominates at one moment and another influence at another moment. And in Beelzebub's Tales, in BT 43 1098-9, he talks about how war is inevitable without being padog duty. According to the laws of nature, there must periodically always proceed on the earth, independently of the will of men, wars and civil wars, and this is because certain periods there is required by nature a greater quantity of deaths. BT 43, 1107. And so, my dear Hassin, when it appears that the instinctive need for conscious labor and intentional suffering in order to be able to take in and transmute in themselves the sacred substances, abrustinus, substance of the astral body, and hectonus, substance of the soul. In BT 43, 1106, just these substances by which the higher being bodies of three-brained beings, namely the body Kesjan and the body the soul, are in general formed and perfected by means of conscious labors and intentional sufferings, and thereby to liberate the sacred Asokan for the maintenance of the moon and Anulius had finally disappeared from the psyche of your favorites, then general nature itself was constrained to adapt herself to extract the sacred substance by other means, one of which is precisely that periodic terrifying process there of reciprocal destruction. Page 26, Ouspensky. In real art, there is nothing accidental. It is mathematics. Everything in it can be calculated. Everything can be known beforehand. The Great Sphinx in Egypt is such a work of art. And in Beelzebub's Tales 30.465, talks about how art can reveal legomenisms, that is, wisdom passed down from the past. On Mondays, namely on the day of religious and civil ceremonies, the learned beings of the first group demonstrated various ceremonies in which the fragments of knowledge that had been previously selected for transmission were indicated by means of inexactitudes in the lore of sevenfoldness, chiefly in the inexactitudes of the lawful movements of the participants in the given ceremonies. For instance, let us suppose that the leader of the given ceremony, the priest, or according to contemporaries, the clergyman, had to raise his arms towards heaven. This posture of his infallibility demands, in accordance with the law of sevenfoldness, that his feet should normally be placed in a certain position. But these Babylonian learned beings intentionally put the feet of the said leader of the ceremony, not as it should be placed in accordance with this law, but otherwise. And in general, it was just in these otherwises that the learned beings of that group indicated in the movements of the participants in the given religious ceremony, by convention what is called an alphabet, those ideas that they intended should be transmitted through these ceremonies to the men beings of their remote descendants. Ouspensky, Chapter 2, page 31. And Gurdjieff's chief motive became clearer to me. He by no means wanted to make it easy for people to become acquainted with his ideas. On the contrary, he considered that only by overcoming difficulties, however irrelevant and accidental, could people value his ideas. Page 37. Knowledge is material. There is a definite quantity of it, in a given place at a given time. Taken in large quantity by one man, it produces very good results. Taken in small quantity by a large number of people, it gives no results at all. Page 39. Knowledge cannot come to people without effort on their own part. Page 67. Knowledge by itself cannot give understanding. Understanding depends on the relation of knowledge to being. So now in Gurdjieff's Meetings with Remarkable Men, in chapter 10, Professor Skridlov, Gurdjieff goes into the meaning of knowledge and understanding. Professor Skridlov, deeply stirred, could not contain himself and exclaimed in astonishment, "Father Giovanni, I cannot understand how you can calmly stay here instead of returning to Europe, at least your own country, Italy, to give the people there, if only 1,000th part of all the penetrating faith that you are now inspiring in me." Mr. Professor," replied Father Giovanni, "it is evident that you do not understand man's psyche as well as you understand archaeology. Faith cannot be given to a man. Faith arises in a man and increases in its action in him, not as the result of automatic learning. That is, not from any automatic ascertainment of height, breadth, thickness, form, and weight, or from the perception of anything by sight, hearing, touch, smell, or taste, but from understanding. Understanding is the essence obtained from information, intentionally learned, and from all kinds of experiences personally experienced. For example, if my own beloved brother were to come here to me, here at this moment, and urgently entreat me to give him merely 1/10th part of my understanding, and I myself wished with my whole being to do so, yet I could not, in spite of my most ardent desire, give him even the 1,000th part of this understanding, as he had neither the knowledge nor the experience which I have, quite accidentally, acquired and lived through in my life. No, Professor, it is 100 times easier, as it is said in the Gospels, for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, than for anyone to give to another the understanding formed in him about anything whatsoever. I formerly also thought, as you do, and even chose the activity of a missionary in order to teach everyone faith in Christ. I wanted to make everyone as happy as I myself felt from faith in the teachings of Jesus Christ. But to wish to do that by, so to say, grafting faith on by words is just like wishing to fill someone with bread merely by looking at him. Understanding is acquired, as I have already said, from the totality of information intentionally learned and from personal experiences, whereas knowledge is only the automatic remembrance of words in a certain sequence. Not only is it impossible, even with one's own desires, to give to another one's inner understanding formed in the course of life from the said factors, but also, as I recently established with certain other brothers of our monastery, there exists a law that the quality that is perceived by anyone when another person tells him something, either from his knowledge or from his understanding, depends on the quality of the data formed in the person speaking. Yes, Professor Skridlov, knowledge and understanding are quite different. Only understanding can lead to being, whereas knowledge is but a passing presence in it. New knowledge displaces the old, and the result is, as it were, pouring from the empty into the void. One must strive to understand this alone can lead to our Lord God. And in order to be able to understand the phenomena of nature, according and not according to law, proceeding around us, one must first of all consciously perceive and assimilate a mass of information concerning objective truth and the real events which took place on earth in the past. And secondly, one must bear in oneself all the results of all kinds of voluntary and involuntary experiences. So now in Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, BT 46.1169-70, form and sequence. Beelzebub explains the need to acquire the reason of understanding rather than the reason of knowing, and describes his method in his Tales to his grandson, Hassin, as follows. Well then, my boy, in order that the mentioned Cernophokalanian friction should be obtained in beings, and that at the same time the crystallization of the new perception should proceed for the reason of understanding, I already knowing very well what are called the laws of fixing and unfixing of ideas in locations, the details of which laws, to mention it, by the way, I learned also thanks to the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy during my sojourn among them as professional hypnotist, had in view during my tales, among many other necessary principles in respect of the current perception of new information through guidance from without, always to keep also to the same inevitable rule, so that the gradualness of the enlarging of, as is said, the quintessence of the information should proceed in you with the entire absence of the being impulses of indignation, offense, vexation, and so forth. The conscious reason of understanding, which in general is proper for three-brained beings to have, is something which blends with their common presence, and therefore information of every kind, perceived with this reason, becomes forever their inseparable part. The information perceived with this reason, or results obtained thanks to being contemplation of the totality of the formerly perceived information. However a being himself may change, and whatever changes may proceed in the spheres around him, will be forever a part of his essence. As for that reason which for most of our contemporary favorites has become habitual, and which I call reason of knowing, every kind of new impression perceived through this reason, and likewise every kind of intentionally or simply automatically obtained result from formerly perceived impressions, is only a temporary part of the being, and might result in them exclusively only in certain surrounding circumstances, and on the definite condition that the information which constitutes all his foundation and entirely should without fail be from time to time, say, refreshed and repeated. Otherwise, these formerly perceived impressions change of themselves, or even entirely, so to say, evaporate out of the common presence of the three-brained being. And the new impressions crystallized in another order, that is, through the reason of knowing, settle into the being localizations at random, quite without any kind, so to say, classifications. All these new impressions settle in the series of these former impressions which always have nothing in common with them, and always remains only simply as information, without any kind of cognizance by the whole of their being. As regards this latter fact ensuing from the already degenerated function of the reason proper to three-brained beings, and which most of our contemporary favorites today already have, our respected teacher Mullah Nasser Eddin expresses by the following words: as soon as anything is needed, it seems that it is filthy and eaten by mice. Although in respect to the sacred Tir Mazakamno, the process of the arising of both kinds of being reason flows equally, yet the fulfilling factors for the actualization of its three separate holy forces are different, namely for the formation of the reason of knowing, the formerly perceived contradictory impressions crystallized in any one of the three locations which the three-brained beings have, serve as the affirming and denying factors, and the new impressions proceeding from without serve in this case as the third factors. And for the reason of understanding, these factors are as following. And the first, that is the sacred affirming, is the newly perceived impressions of any localization which has at the given moment what is called the center of gravity functioning. Second, or sacred denying, is the corresponding data present in another of his localizations. And the third factor is the results of the persevering actualization of the striving towards the manifestation of one's own individuality, from the results of the actualization of being Patak Judy. Only thanks to this factor in the process of the blending of newly perceived impressions of every kind in the presence of three-brained beings, are there crystallized, on the basis of the sacred Triyamasikamna, data for one's own cognizance and understanding proper to the being alone. And thus they proceeds what is called Cernophakalanian friction, thanks to which the sacred substances Abrastinus and Hectonus are chiefly formed in them for the coating and perfecting of their higher parts with objective knowledge. So now we have chapter 3 in Ouspensky, and it's been skipped as non-specific. Then we get to chapter 4 in Ouspensky, page 67. Knowledge by itself does not give understanding. Understanding depends on the relation of knowledge to being. Page 71. There are 7 types of man. Man 1 is man with a physical body. Man 2 is the emotional man. Man 3 is the man of reason, whose knowledge is based on scholastics. Man 4 is the man who has his ideals. Man 5 is a man who has reached unity and has already been crystallized. Man 6 is very close to the ideal man, but some of his properties have not yet become permanent. Man 7 is the man who has reached the full development possible to man. Page 72. Every man is born number 1, number 2, or number 3. Man number 4 is always the product of schoolwork. Page 73. The same order of division into 7 categories must be applied to everything relating to man, in art, religion, science, philosophy, etc. Page 75. It is impossible to study a system of the universe without studying man. At the same time, it is impossible to study man without studying the universe. Man is the image of the world. Page 77. Every phenomenon is the result of the combination of 3 forces: positive, active 1, negative, passive 2, and neutral, neutralizing 3. Page 79. The Absolute is designated by the number 1 because the 3 forces are united. Let us image the Absolute as a circle, and in it a number of other circles, worlds of second order. The second circles will be designated by number 3, because the world of the second order of the 3 forces are already divided. The 3 divided forces in the world of the second order create new worlds of the third order. 6 different forces will be acting upon the worlds of the third order. Page 80. Orders of the world. The first order world is affected by 1 force, the single independent will of the Absolute. The second order world is affected by 3 forces, all of the galaxies. The third order is affected by 6 forces, the Milky Way, 3 from second, plus 3 new forces. Fourth order world is affected by 12 forces, our Sun, 3 from the second, and 6 from the third, and 3 new forces. Fifth order world is affected by 24 forces, planets in our solar system, 3 from the second, 6 from the third, and 12 from the fourth, plus 3 new forces. Sixth order world is affected by 48 forces, Earth, 3 from the second, 6 from the third, 12 from the fourth, 24 from the fifth, plus 3 new forces. Seventh order world is affected by 96 forces, the Moon, 3 from the second, 6 from the third, 12 from the fourth, 24 from the fifth, 48 from the sixth, and 3 new forces. Page 80. The chain of the worlds which links the Absolute to the Moon forms the ray of creation which we find ourselves. Page 81. The number of forces in each world indicates the number of the laws to which the given world is subject. We live in a world subject to 48 orders of laws. So the Ouspensky diagram in Figure 3 has the worlds, absolute, all suns, sun, all planets, earth, and moon. And he also associates this with man 1 through 7, which is clearly corresponding to the ray of creation depicted below. And in more detail, in SM chapter 10. This simplistic view was replaced in BT in favor of cosmoses. So in Beelzebub's tales, man is not categorized this way, but by gradations of reason, as below. In this picture, BT 47, 1177, Beelzebub achieves the reason of the sacred podkolad, the last gradation before the reason of the sacred anklad. And you see he developed these points on his antler. The first point was physical, the next was emotional, the next was mental, and the next was spirit, and the next was soul. So the remnants of Gurdjieff's ray of creation are shown in BT chapter 9 and BT 39. According to Beelzebub in BT 9.82, the creation of the moon and Anulius happened because of a miscalculation by the archangels that caused a comet named Condor to crash into the earth. BT 39, 770. From this disaster, tetrarchosmoses are Keschapmatian, nearly half-beings, because the ray of creation does not end in the center of the planet. This is further explained in BT. Thus the first tetrarchosmoses on Earth and Mars, because of its 2 minor moons, were no longer polymetic beings, or Keschapmatian, nearly half-beings. Thus the completing process of the sacred heptaparapashanak does not proceed in the present time through us or through our favorites into the center of each planet as it does in the rest of the universe, at the place called the sacred Ashag Protyahari. Because of this, the completing process of the sacred heptaparapashanak for the continuation of the species, for instance, proceeds not through one being, as it proceeds with tetrarchosmoses, but through 2 beings of different sexes, called by us activists and pacifists, thus on planet Earth, man and woman. Now we're at chapter 5 in Ouspensky and chapter 9, which is an elaboration of chapter 5. Page 83. According to the ray of creation, the moon is still an unborn planet. Page 84. A miracle in the manifestation of this world, of the laws of another world. The influence of the moon upon everything living manifests itself in all that happens on earth. Man cannot tear himself free from the moon. All his movements, and consequently all his actions, are controlled by the moon. The mechanical part of our life is subject to the moon. Page 87. The world consists of matter in a state of vibration. The rate of vibration is in an inverse ratio to the density of matter. An atom of the absolute is smaller than the atom of its first-order world. An atom of the first-order world is smaller than an atom of the second-order world, etc. Page 90. Every substance has 4 aspects or states which correspond to fire, air, water, and earth. Substance which conducts the active force is called carbon. 1. Substance which conducts the passive force is called oxygen. 2. Substance which conducts the neutralizing force is called nitrogen. 3. Substance without a force is called hydrogen. 6. Page 90. Force is divided into 3 types and matter is divided into 4 types. Page 95. The laws of a game make the essence of the game. A violation of these laws would destroy the entire game. The Absolute cannot interfere in our life and substitute other results in the place of the natural results of causes created by us or created accidentally. Page 95. The moon is the weight on a clock. Organic life is the mechanism of the clock brought into motion by the weight. If the weight is removed, all movements in the mechanism of the clock will at once stop. Page 167. All suns of the Milky Way influence our sun. The sun influences the planets. All planets influence our Earth, and the Earth influences the moon. These influences are transmitted by means of radiations passing through starry and interplanetary space. Let us study these radiations in an abridged form of the ray of creation. Absolute, Sun, Earth, Moon. This forms 3 octaves of radiation. The shock in the octave of the Sun, Earth, is the organic life on Earth. And here you have the interval of the Absolute going to La, Sol, Fa, and then the first shock. And then Mi, Re, Do, the Sun. And then La, Sol, Fa is the second shock, the organic life on Earth. And Mi, Re, Do is Earth. And La, Sol, Fa is the third shock. Mi, Re, Do is the moon. You'll notice that Do and Si, or T, is combined. So there are 3 shocks that are imaged here, but only one shock, the organic life on Earth, is described. And this is in figure 24. Page 178. Man never on any count wants to pay for anything, and above all, he does not want to pay for what is most important to him. Everything must be paid for, and it must be paid for in proportion to what is received. Page 179. It is necessary to learn how to save the greater part of the energy we possess for useful work instead of wasting to unproductivity. Energy is spent chiefly on unnecessary and unpleasant emotions, and on the expectation of unpleasant things, on bad moods and unnecessary haste, and so on. Learn to separate the fine from the coarse. The principle from the Emerald Tables of Hermes Trismegistus refers to the work of the human factory. Page 181. The human organism receives 3 kinds of food. Ordinary food we eat, the air we breathe, impressions. The process of transforming the substances which enter the organism into finer ones is governed by the law of octaves. Page 189. Alchemical law states that in order to make gold, it is first of all necessary to have a certain quantity of real gold. So now we're on Beelzebub's Tales, and you'll see that Ouspensky has already expanded the ray of creation into triads labeled as hydrogens that provide elements in the food octave, and they've been given numbers. Active force is called carbon, passive force is oxygen, neutral force is nitrogen, no force is hydrogen. This concept of substances was completely abandoned by Gurdjieff and becomes one of the major differences with the Ouspensky system. In Search of the Miraculous, the ray of creation is divided into triads of carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, from higher to lower, as follows. Carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen together will give matter of the 4th order, or hydrogen, whose density will designate by the number 6 as the sum of 1, 2, and 3. That is hydrogen 6. So here's the first triad, hydrogen 6. These triads are assigned a hydrogen number that is useful to define substances from food, air, impressions from lower to higher quality. No relation to the periodic table. Elements hydrogen, whose atomic number is 1, or carbon is 6, or oxygen is 8, or nitrogen is 7. In Table 3, the hydrogens from H1 to H3072. So here is the whole octave laid out with hydrogens. It shows the position of impressions, the position of air, and the position of food. And these have been assigned a number. So impressions is H48, air is 192, and food is 768. And these are assigned to the 3 sections of a human: impressions in the head, air in the chest, food in the back and lower part of the body. That's in Ouspensky figure 25. So now these numbers can be used in a more detailed display, giving the locations of the elements in the human 3-story shown in Search of the Miraculous, Chapter 9, Figure 39. And Figure 39 is the complete picture of the intensive work of the organism and of the intensive production of substances from the products of nutrition after the first conscious shock. Look at the circle with 768 in the area of the physical body. And the food progresses to Ray and then to me. It continues on because of the shock from air, which is 192. This allows the physical food to proceed to Fa, Sol, La, and Si. And Si is the sperm or the ovum produced by this. Now Do 192 is air, and it moves to Ray and to me. And then in order to go further, it needs a conscious shock at Do in the area of the mind, in order for it to pass further into Fa, Sol, and La. And then Do 48 only goes from Ray to me. Beelzebub's Tales finally reveals the organs of the physical body and renames the numbers into independent arisings. Most of the second and third set can be extrapolated from the Search of the Miraculous numbers and positions. So here I have related the different parts of the body and the spirit and the soul to these vibrations in each of the 3 octaves: the octave of body, the octave of spirit, and the octave of soul. And using the diagram from Ouspensky, we can assign them areas. And here we have the body, where it's the stomach and the duodenum, and then the liver, and the lungs are giving the air to the liver. Then we have the cerebellum and the cerebrum. Unfortunately, Gurdjieff has the cerebellum and the cerebrum in the wrong order. But you can see from this diagram that the cerebellum is more related to the body, and the cerebrum is more related to the soul. And then the line goes down to La, which is the endocrine system, which was also left out, and then the sexual system at T. Now, in terms of the spirit that began with the lungs, it's clear that the next level up would be the heart. And then, considering that the thymus is in the soul area, that would make sense to be the next one. And then the spleen is coming back down to the middle level, and then to the lower level, the kidney and adrenal. And then the spirit goes up to the hypothalamus and the pineal gland. And for the soul, it starts with the 5 senses, then to the vestibular system, then to the proprioception system, then to the parietal lobe, then the occipital lobe, then the temporal lobe, and the frontal lobe. So this is an example of combining the Ouspensky diagrams with the Gurdjieff diagram. So in BT 39-761, In Tathagata-cosmoses, the following names are given to the three independent arisings. Number 1, Pratyahari. Number 2, Diphratohari, Tritohari, Tetratohari, Pangiohari. And then there's 6, which I show to be the missing place, which I have assigned Harmoniary. And then Exiohari is T, and then the 8th one is, by its name, is clearly the higher Do, result Surin. The full process is shown at 39.786 to 793. Hanal Miesno appears to describe a process similar to In Search of the Miraculous carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen reactions. Hanal Miesno acts at Re, Mi, Sol, and T. You will note that some of the processes require a different process, where an external force must enter in each as the gap of Mi-Fa, called the mechano-coinciding midline, and Tito, called the intentionally actualized midline. These are a throwback to the two discontinuities of increased retarded from In Search of the Miraculous, chapters 7 and 14. As for the Soul-La section, the third Stapanda, Gurdjieff introduces a complicated system. BT 39.754. As regards the third Stapanda, then changed in its subjective action, which is fifth in general successiveness, and is called Hanal Ut, its disharmony flowed by itself from the change of the two mentioned Stapandas. This disharmony in its subjective functioning, flowing from its asymmetry, so to say, in relation to the whole entire completed process of the sacred Heptaparapashnak, consists in the following. If the completing process of this sacred law flows in conditions where during its process there are many extraneously caused vibrations, then its functioning gives only external results. But if this same process proceeds in absolute quiet, without any external extraneously caused vibrations whatsoever, then all the results of the action of its functioning remain within the concentration in which it completes its process. And for the outside, these results only become evident on direct and immediate contact with it. And if, however, during its functioning, there are neither of these two sharply opposite conditions, then the results of the action of its processes usually divide themselves into the external and the internal. This is a very complicated section, and I've conjectured in my lecture, Deciphering Hanal Ut in Gurdjieff's World Creation, that Hanal Ut is composed as such. See, Hanal Ut 1 is active, Hanal Ut 2 is passive, and Hanal Ut 3 is neutralizing. One can visualize that Hanal Miesno acts locally and Hanal Ut globally within the cosmic octave, as it does in the food octave. So here's the detailed diagram of the food octave, and you see how we can assign Hanal Ut number 2 to the area between the lungs and the cerebrum, and Hanal Ut to the cerebrum and the endocrine system. And you see Gurdjieff has cerebrum followed by cerebellum, but I've reversed their order for the reasons that I gave earlier. So this is a pretty important diagram because it fixes the order of the cerebellum and the cerebrum, fills in the missing Stapanda, which is vaguely described as Trinva, and I have assigned it the endocrine system using information from Ouspensky. So here in the food octave you have the action of Hanal Ut 1, Hanal Ut 2, and Hanal Ut 3, and they obviously act globally in the whole creation. So to discuss more about the missing Stapanda at law, you see that Gurdjieff in its beginning unfortunately left it out, but it is apparent in Ouspensky that it does exist. For instance, SM chapter 18, page 378, Ouspensky says, I felt that there was much material in the enneagram. Point 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8 represented, according to the food diagram, different systems of the organism. And there he spells it out, where he has the brain and the spinal cord, again reversed, but that's okay. But number 8 there is the sympathetic system. So you can see that the missing stoppander is definitely, as I've said, harmoniary. And I talk about this more in my essay, The Key to the Soul is Within the Missing Stoppander in the Food Octave. So BT 4869 also has an error, where it says that Pangiohari, which is already at soul, must evolve to the next stoppander, which would be the missing stoppander, harmoniary. So, moving on to chapter 5, the last part of Ouspensky. On page 96, he talks about the Last Supper as a magical ceremony equivalent to blood brother. And here I have discussed the Last Supper, although this is not in Beelzebub's Tales. Using the chapter 38 in religion, I do come up with the Enneagram of Jesus. The interesting theory of sharing blood does fit the situation, but one must ask why it did not work after Gurdjieff's death. Was no one of the right level for it to work? The truth is that Eastern tradition shows that Jesus survived the cross by tricking Pilate with a poison that simulated death, and it was a convenient lie to convince followers. Tibetan Buddhism is a valid religion, and its spiritual head is a lama, reincarnated from a previous one. There does not seem to be a required blood sharing for this to happen. This tradition is what is called the belief of the second coming of Christ. The confusion is explained in Holy Planet Purgatory 39, 766 to 767. The point is that according to various second-grade cosmic laws, the being body Kesjan cannot exist long in this sphere, and at the end of a certain time, this second being part must decompose, irrespective of whether the higher being part existing within it had by that time attained the requisite degree of reason. And in view of the fact that as long as this higher being part does not perfect its reason to the required degree, it must always be dependent upon some Kesjanian arising or other. Therefore, immediately after the second sacred Raskuano, every such still unprotected higher being body gets into a state called Tegekno, or searching for some other similar two-natured arising corresponding to itself, so that when the higher part of the two-natured arising perfects itself to the required degree of reason, and the final process of the sacred Raskuano occurs to it, and the speedy disintegration of its Kesjanian body is not yet sensed, this higher being body must instantly enter the other body Kesjan and continue to exist in it for its further perfection, which perfection must sooner or later be inevitably accomplished by every arisen higher being body. So now we're on to chapter 6, In Search of the Miraculous. Page 97, chapter 6. Until a man has defined his own aim for himself, he will not be able to begin to do anything. There are many aims of existence. Page 100. What happens to us may depend upon 3 causes: accident, fate, or our own will. Such as we are almost wholly dependent upon accident. Page 103. Wars cannot be stopped. War is due to common forces, to planetary influences. Page 104. Without self-knowledge, man cannot be free. Self-observation is the work or the way which leads to self-knowledge. Page 111. Daydreaming is absolutely the opposite of useful mental activity. Observation of the activity of imagination, daydreaming, forms a very important part of self-study. The next object of self-observation must be habits in general. Man is a machine controlled by accidental shocks from outside. Page 117. You can only know consciousness in yourself. In order to really observe oneself, one must first of all remember oneself in self-remembering. One's attention is directed towards the object observed and towards oneself. So I've titled this Questions and Answers Are a Model for Ouspensky Learning Groups. When at a Gurdjieff group meeting, it is difficult to ask a question for fear of being laughed at. Thus this chapter is possible questions. What is aim? How to obtain I am? I help myself before helping others. How do I create more difficulty in order to grow faster? How do I know myself? Or how do I observe myself? How do I distinguish between feelings and thought? How do I change something about myself without disrupting the balance? How do I avoid imagination? How do I avoid unpleasant emotions? How do I keep the instinctive center and the moving center and the sex center from gaining control? Alas, these questions are trivial once one takes note of the last two centers in my enneagram of the senses, which includes the sixth and seventh senses from Wikipedia, that describes the seven senses that enhance the five senses that we all know. Upon examination, these two senses are remarkably similar to the popular Ouspensky method of observing oneself, which is responsible for the mass psychosis of many Ouspensky followers. From these, it can be understood that being Pardog Judy has nothing to do with the cultivating of these two senses that we already possess. So here's the senses octave: touch, taste, smell, hearing, seeing. That's 5. But then the sixth sense is called vestibular, which is balance and attention, and the seventh sense is proprioception, spatial prediction, intuition, awareness of self. See my essay, Three-Body Gurdjieff Enneagram of the Body, Spirit, and Soul. The vestibular system adjusts balance and attention. This system accounts for the perception of our body in relation to gravity, movement, and balance. It provides information related to movement and head position. It is important for the development of balance, coordination, eye control, attention, being secure with movement, and some aspects of language development. It measures acceleration, G-force, body movements, and head position. Therefore, knowing that you are moving when you are in an elevator, knowing whether you are lying down or sitting up, and being able to walk along a balance beam. Interestingly, the corresponding ray in the initial Ouspensky diagram was located in the chest level, which was probably due to the concept that balance is at the center of one's being. It supports my choice of separating it as an actual stoppender. Now it probably would be assigned to the head. The proprioception system manifests the ability of spatial prediction, intuition, and awareness of self. It is the sensing of the relative position of neighboring parts of the body and strength of effort being employed in movement. It was developed by the nervous system as a means to keep track of and control the different parts of the body. Therefore, a normal person could move a finger knowing where and what the finger is doing. With little effort, the normal person could just put his or her finger to his or her nose easily. Without it, the brain cannot feel what the finger is doing, and the process must be carried out in more conscious and calculated steps. using vision to compensate for the lost feedback on the movement of the finger. Thus it is used for sobriety tests by the police. Interestingly, the corresponding me in the initial Ouspensky diagram was located at the lower body level, which was probably due to the concept that awareness of self comes from the ground up. It supports my choice of separating it as an actual stoppender. Now it probably would be assigned to the head. Instead of trying to use these two senses as we already have, it is far more effective to use conscience to control the emotions and consciousness to control the mind. Conscience is to practice agape love as Jesus and Buddha taught. Consciousness involves the study of real facts and not hearsay, because it is difficult to think for yourself while parroting all sorts of useless knowledge taught in school that you memorize to get good grades. Chapter 7 in Ouspensky, page 122a. The first fundamental law of the universe is the law of three. Every phenomenon is a result of simultaneous action of the three factors: the positive, negative, and the neutralizing. Page 122b. The next fundamental law of the universe is the law of seven, or the law of octaves. In order to understand the meaning of this law, it is necessary to regard the universe as consisting of vibrations. Page 123. In ancient knowledge, the understanding of vibrations is based on the idea of the discontinuity of vibrations. All vibrations in nature do not develop uniformly, but instead develop with periodic accelerations and retardations. The force of the original impulse in vibrations does not actually act uniformly, but becomes alternately stronger and weaker. The periods of uniform action of the momentum are not equal, and the moments of retardation of the vibrations are not symmetrical. One period is shorter and the other is longer. Page 124a. In order to determine these moments of retardation, the lines of development of vibrations are divided into periods corresponding to the doubling or the halving of the number of vibrations in a given space of time. It has been found that in the interval of vibrations between a given number of vibrations and a number twice as large, there are two places where a retardation in the increase of vibrations takes place. One is near the beginning, and the other occurs almost at the end. Page 124b. These laws were incorporated into a formula. In this formula, the period in which vibrations are doubled was divided into 8 unequal steps corresponding to the rate of increase in the vibrations. The 8th step repeats the first step with the double of the number of vibrations. The period of doubling the vibration is called an octave, composed of 8. The separate steps of an octave show acceleration and retardation at different moments of the development of the period. Page 125. The 7-tone scale is the formula of a cosmic law which was applied to music. In the ascending octave, we will designate the low end as Do and the point at which the vibrations have doubled also as Do. The period between one Do and the next is divided into 7 unequal parts because the frequency of vibrations does not increase uniformly. Page 125. The ratio of the pitch of the notes is as follows: Do 1, Re 9 divided by 8, Mi 10 divided by 8 or 5 divided by 4, Fa 4 divided by 3, Sol 12 divided by 8 or 3 divided by 2, La 5 divided by 3, Si 15 divided by 8, Do 16 divided by 8 or 2. The difference in acceleration is as follows: from Do to Re, it's 9/8 to 1, or 9/8. Re to mi is 10/8 to 9/8, which is 10 divided by 9. Mi to fa is 4 divided by 3 to 10 divided by 8, which is 16 divided by 15. This is increase retarded. Fa to sol is 3 divided by 2 to 4 divided by 3, which is 9 divided by 8. Sol to la is 5 divided by 3 to 3 divided by 2, and that's 10 divided by 9. La to si is 15 divided by 8 to 5 divided by 3, which is 9 divided by 8. Si to do is 16 divided by 8 to 15 divided by 8, which is 16 divided by 15. Increase again retarded. So page 126, the difference in the pitch of the notes are called intervals. There are 3 kinds of intervals in an octave: 9/8, 10/9, and 16/15. The smallest interval, 16/15, occurs in the places of retardation in the octave. In music, one semitone is found between the following pairs: do, re, mi, fa, sol, sol, la, and la, si. A semitone does not exist in the mi, fa, and si, do intervals. Page 127. The law of octaves explains why there are no straight lines in nature. At the moment of retardation of vibration, a deviation from the original direction takes place. Let us assume that a movement begins at do. It will continue in a straight line through mi, but a deviation occurs between mi and fa, which causes a change from the original direction. From fa through si, the movement continues in the new direction. Between si and do, the second interval occurs, which causes a new change in direction. The next octave gives an even more marked deviation, so that the line of octaves may eventually complete a circle. Page 129. The intervals cause the line of the development of force to constantly change. Think how many turns the line of development of forces must have taken to come from the gospel preaching of love to the Inquisition. Page 129. The law of octaves explains many phenomena in our lives. The principle of the deviation of forces, the fact that everything in the world is moving and changing, in development, rises and falls are constantly taking place. Page 130. Nothing can develop by staying on one level. Ascent or descent is the inevitable cosmic condition of any action. Page 131. The consistent development of an octave is based on what looks like an accident. If octaves are going parallel to a given octave and intersect its interval, they can fill up the interval. This additional shock must correspond in force and character to the interval it is filling. In the ascending octave, the second interval, si-do, is much larger than the first interval, mi-fa. In the descending octave, the greatest interval occurs at the very beginning of the octave. A descending octave develops much more easily than an ascending octave. Page 132. The lines of the development of forces which are straightened out by accident give man the illusion of straight lines. If by accident a man's activity gives a result, he assumes that he can attain his aim. Page 134. Man can learn to recognize the moments of the intervals in all lines of his activity, and he can learn to create the necessary additional shocks. Descending cosmic octaves are creative, and ascending cosmic octaves are evolutionary. Page 134. Octaves are divided into fundamental and subordinate. The fundamental octave is like the trunk of a tree. The 7 fundamental notes and the 2 intervals, the bearers of new directions, give altogether 9 links in a chain, 3 groups of 3 links each. The human body has 9 basic measurements expressed by the numbers of a definite measure. This section of Gurdjieff I've titled Analyzing the Frequencies in the Law of 7, which uncovers 2 discontinuities, increase retarded, which suggests that they might correspond to the 2 bottom points of the inner triangle. So this diagram still comes from Ouspensky, and you see how it's mapped out as was discussed. And you can see the increase retarded between mi and fa, and the increase again retarded in si and do. Of course, remembering that si is the same as ti in modern music form. Gurdjieff implies that those who know the secret of this law of 7 map this out in the Enneagram as the inner triangle, so that the 2 points of discontinuity are really at the 2 ends of the triangle. So then you get the following grouping: Si, Do, Re in the middle, Sol, discontinuity La on the left, and Mi, discontinuity of auto egocrat. We have this duty Fa on the right. So on further analysis, using music theory and adding half notes, these discontinuities actually disappear. You could look at my essay, All and Everything about Gurdjieff's Stoppenders. And here is just intonation, which is what the piano would be set at. And you see how everything's mapped out. So you go C at the top, and then D, Re, Re, Mi, Fa, Fi, Sol, Sil, La, Li, Ti. And this would be what the piano would be. And if we draw a triangle between these 2, we would have a triangle between Si, Fa, and La. And this is what the endlessness auto-egocrat would look like. So the surprising result in this diagram is that all 3 vertices of the triangle actually match 3 of the most consonant intervals: the root note of the octave unison, the perfect 4th Fa, the major 6th La, the sequence of Do unison, Fa perfect 4th, and La major 6th clearly leads to the next octave Do, and this follows the inner triangle. The most consonant perfect 5th Sol is at the bottom center, directly opposite the apex of the triangle, as if echoing the unison. The right-hand side is very crowded from Do to Mi, as it needs the uplift of Fa, the perfect 4th. The note Ti wants to resolve in Do. More important is to observe and hear how these sets of 3 within the octave demonstrate how the law of 3 acts within 7 notes. You can have active Mi, Fa, and Sol, neutralizing Sol, La, and Ti, passive Ti, Do, and Re. So this would represent auto-egocrat that existed before his endlessness, changed creation by applying the following rules that are in Holy Planet Purgatory, chapter 39, page 753. But the importance here is that in Gurdjieff's chapter on creation, he is now using stoppenders. So what needs to be discovered is that despite the similarity of stoppenders to musical notes, they are really physical positions in the Enneagram. So here is a quote from All and Everything. Our common Father, omni-being endlessness, having decided to change the principle of the maintenance of the existence of this then unique cosmic concentration and sole place of his most glorious being, first of all altered the process itself of the functioning of these 2 fundamental primordial sacred laws, and he actualized the greater change in the law of the sacred Heptaparapashanat. These changes in the functioning of the sacred Heptaparapashanat consisted in this, that in 3 of the stoppenders he altered what is called subjective actions, which had been until then in the stoppenders. In this respect, that in 1 he lengthened the stoppender between the 3rd and 4th deflection, that's Mi, Fa, called the mechano-coinciding midline, for the purpose of providing the requisite inherency for receiving for its functioning the automatic affluence of all forces which were near, and he shortened the stoppender between its last deflection and the beginning of the new cycle, Tdo, the intentionally actualized midline, to facilitate the commencement of a new cycle of its completing processing. And thirdly, he disharmonized the subjective action of the stoppender, that is fifth in the general successiveness, soul to law. Its disharmony flowed by itself from the change of the two aforementioned stoppenders. As regards the third stoppender, then changed in its subjective action, which is fifth in successiveness, and is called Hanal Ut. Its disharmony flowed by itself from the change of the two aforementioned stoppender. The third stoppender would determine the outcome of the completed process. The explanation for this lengthening and shortening of two stoppenders can be shown by comparing the diagram above titled Endlessness Auto-Egocrat, which gives no gaps available for forces to enter in, to the second diagram labeled Endlessness Altered Stoppenders below, which is the usual one shown by Gurdjieff to Ouspensky, titled Readjusted Discontinuities, that allows for two gaps based on discontinuities. To create this usual diagram below, from the diagram Auto-Egocrat, the right part must be lengthened as described in number 1, so that Fa is now below the triangle opening at Mi Fa, and the left part of the circle must be shortened as described in 2 to allow the position law to be above the inner triangle. This opens a space at Soul Law as described in 3. These two places are the primary points where the forces can be entered into the Enneagram to create the spirit and the soul. So this is described further in my paper, Gurdjieff's Creation Story, deciphered in 2 Enneagrams. The famous Enneagram formed by using the repeated decimal of 7 places around a circle, numbered from 1 to 9, with 1, 3, 6, forming the inner triangle. So this is demonstrating Gurdjieff's food octave, where air feeds the spirit and light feeds the soul. This also demonstrates the missing stoppender at 7, which is the endocrine system. Other than that, Gurdjieff goes through the different parts of the body, the stomach, the duodenum, the liver, the lungs, where air enters in, the nervous system and the thinking center, which Gurdjieff had reversed, and then the entry through the senses of photonic light, and then the endocrine system with the hormones and the heart, the reproductive system and the sexual organs. So at the lungs, the air enters in to create the spirit, or the Kastanian body, and at 6, the senses in the mind and the photons of light begin the start of a soul. Ouspensky, Chapter 8, page 141. There are 4 states of consciousness possible for man: sleep, clear consciousness, self-remembering, objective state of consciousness, enlightenment. Page 145. Self-observation brings man to the realization of the necessity for self-change. Page 150. A man identifies with a small problem which confronts him, and he completely forgets the great aims with which he began his work. He fails to see the forest for the trees. Page 151. Identifying is the chief obstacle to self-remembering. On the most prevalent occasions, a man is identified with what others think about him, how they treat him, what attitude they show towards him. Page 153. By considering eternally, a man does that which makes life easy for the other people and for himself. Right external considering is very important in the work. Page 155. Buffers are created slowly and gradually so that the man will not feel the shocks. They are created artificially through education and through the influence of the surrounding life. Buffers make a man's life easier and help him not to feel his conscience. Consciousness is a state in which a man knows all at once. Conscience is a state in which man feels all at once. Page 156. Conscience is a general and permanent phenomenon. It is possible only in the absence of buffers. Morality consists of buffers. There is no general morality. Morality is merely self-suggestion. Page 160. Consciousness of one's nothingness alone can conquer the fear of subordination to the will of another, Page 161. Fate is the result of planetary influences which correspond to a man's type. Fate only relates to a man's essence. A man consists of two parts, essence and personality. Essence in a man is what is his own. Personality in a man is what comes from the outside, and he has learned or reflects. Essence is the truth in man. Page 165. It happens fairly often that essence dies in a man while his personality and his body are still alive. Page 165. Collective accident and collective fate are governed by general laws. General laws are by no means all obligatory for man. Page 165. Nothing shows up people so much as their attitude towards money. They are ready to waste as much as you like on their own personal fantasies, but they have no valuation whatsoever of another person's labor. So further in Ouspensky, he has 4 states of consciousness: sleep, waking state, self-consciousness, objective consciousness. This is one of the favorite teachings of Ouspensky and becomes a means by which followers feel superior because they are awake and others are not. One cannot maintain self-remembering by forcing it. Self-remembering needs to become a natural state, which Beelzebub refers to as being part-dog Judy. Many joke that it means part dog and part human. However, consciousness cannot be permanent until your spirit body, Kesjan, is completed. Rather than relying on self-remembering, Gurdjieff proposed that conscience is the means to perfection. The very saintly Ashiata Shaimas in Ilgamanism passed to worthy individuals deliberated thus. BT 26-359-60. During the period of my year of special observations of all their manifestations and perceptions, I made it categorically clear to myself that although the factors for engendering in their presences the sacred being impulses of faith, hope, and love are already quite degenerated in the beings of this planet, nevertheless the factor which ought to engender that being impulse on which the whole psyche of a three-brained being system is in general based, and in which impulse exists under the name objective consciousness, is not yet atrophied in them, but remains in their presences almost in its primordial state. So I would refer you to my paper on evaluating Gurdjieff's aphorism of faith, love, and hope. Thanks to the abnormally established conditions of external ordinary being existing here, this factor has gradually penetrated and become embedded in that consciousness which is here called subconsciousness, in consequence of which it takes no part whatever in the functioning of their ordinary consciousness. Well then, it was just then that I indubitably understood, with all the separate ruminating parts representing the whole of my I, that if the functioning of that being factor still surviving in their common presences were to participate in the general functioning of that consciousness of theirs, in which they pass their daily, as they here say, waking existence, only then would it be possible to save the contemporary three-brained beings here from the consequences of the properties of that organ which was intentionally implanted into their first ancestors. My further meditations then confirmed for me that it would be possible to attain this only if their general being existence were to flow for a long time under foreseeingly corresponding conditions. When all the above mentioned was completely transubstantiated in me, I decided to consecrate the whole of myself from that time on to the creation here of such conditions that the functioning of the sacred conscience still surviving in their subconsciousness might gradually pass into the functioning of their ordinary consciousness. So this is similar to the teachings of Buddha to harm no one, and Jesus' teachings of agape love in John 21, giving Peter 3 times to accept the concept of agape love. By the 3rd time he gives up, as Peter stubbornly opposes the concept, believing only in ordinary love, philos. So chapter 9 in Ouspensky was included with chapter 5. Chapter 10, page 199. Man lives in life under the law of accident and under 2 kinds of influences, again governed by accident. The first kind are influences created in life itself, race, nation, climate, family, and so on. The second kind of influence is created outside this life, religious systems, philosophical doctrines, works of art, and so on. Page 201. The moment when the man who is looking for the way meets a man who knows the way is called the first threshold of the first step. From this first threshold, the stairway begins. The way begins when the stairway ends. Page 203. The pupil cannot go on without the teacher, and the teacher cannot go on without the pupil or pupils. No one can ascend onto the higher step until he places another man in his own place. When a man has received, he must immediately give back. Only then can he receive more. Otherwise, from him will be taken even what he has already been given. So page 205. Knowledge begins with the teaching of the cosmoses, as above, so below. There are actually 7 cosmoses. Page 206. Each cosmos is a living being, which lives, breathes, thinks, feels, is born, and dies. All cosmoses result from the action of the same forces and of the same laws. Laws are the same everywhere. The interaction of the cosmoses is permanent and always the same. One cosmos is related to another as 0 is to infinity. Page 207. The manifestation of the laws of one cosmos in another cosmos constitutes what we call a miracle. There can be no other kind of miracle. A miracle is not the breaking of laws, nor is it a phenomenon outside of laws. Page 209. We have a perfectly clear example of the relationship of 0 to infinity in geometry. This is the relationship between a body of dimension n to the body of the dimension n plus 1, a point to a line to a plane to a solid, and so forth. Page 201. The plane is only a projection of a body. The line is a projection of a plane, and the point a projection of a line. When we say a thing exists, we mean this existence in time. Time as we feel it is the 4th dimension. Eternity is the 5th dimension. The 6th dimension is the line of the actualization of all possibilities. As every cosmos has a real physical existence, every cosmos, therefore, is 3-dimensional for itself or in itself. Page 213. Time is different in different cosmoses. Time is breath. 24 hours constitute the breath of organic life. Page 214. It was later decided to take man as the microcosmos and to take tritocosmos as the organic life on Earth. So in Search of the Miraculous, chapter 10, page 205. Knowledge begins with the teaching of the cosmoses, as above, so below. There are actually 7 cosmoses. Protocosmos, the first cosmos, the absolute one. Aeocosmos or Megalocosmos, the Holy Cosmos, all worlds, 3. Macrocosmos, the large cosmos, Milky Way, 6. Deuterocosmos, the second cosmos, Sun, 12. Mesocosmos, the middle cosmos, all planets, solar system, 24. Tritocosmos, the third cosmos, was man, but should be planet, page 214. Microcosmos, the small cosmos, atom, was assigned to man. That was in page 214. By comparing this with Beelzebub's tales, it appears that there are 2 missing cosmoses, but they can be reconstructed by radiation. In Search of the Miraculous, man was in microcosmos, but was replaced to tetatocosmos. So in Search of the Miraculous, chapter 10, page 204, knowledge begins with the teaching of the cosmoses. As above, so below. In Beelzebub's tales, protocosmos is implied to be megalocosmos, to allow for 7 lower cosmoses. So BT 39 760 to 761. They named the most holy prime source sun, absolute itself, protocosmos. 1. The emanation of the most holy sun, absolute itself, they called, as I have already told you, Thermertomagalokas, or Word God, each newly arising second-order sun, with all its consequent definite results, they called Defertocosmos. And this is macrocosmos from In Search of the Miraculous. 7. The common radiations of the newly arisen second-order suns taken together, they called Polorotheopal. 2. The radiation of each separate second-order sun, Mectechozoin, third-order suns. These are now called planets. They are called Tritocosmos. 3. The radiation of each planet separately, they called Dinomuzoin, the smallest relatively independent formation of the planets, which arose thanks to the new inherency of the fifth stopender of the sacred Heptaparapashnok, and which was the very smallest similarity to the whole, was called microcosmos. 4. That given off from microcosmos they called photozoin. And finally, these formations of microcosmos, which also became concentrated on the planets, this time thanks to the second-order cosmic law called mutual attraction of the similar, were named tetatocosmos. Mesocosmos, In Search of the Miraculous. 6. The radiations of all the planets together of any solar system they call astroluo-lucidoin. Macrocosmos. 5. The radiations issuing from the tetatocosmos they called ambelazon. So with this comparison to the radiations, we come up with Beelzebub's tales, higher to lower cosmoses. Protocosmos 1, the first cosmos, megalocosmos. 2, macrocosmos, and we get this from In Search of the Miraculous, the large cosmos, galaxy, Milky Way. 3, Defertocosmos, the second-order suns. 4, mesocosmos, and this we get from In Search of the Miraculous, the middle cosmos, solar system. And 5, Tritocosmos, third-order suns, planet. 6, Tetatocosmos, man. 7, Microcosmos, atom. In Beelzebub's tales, in Tritocosmoses, the following names were given to the 3 independent arisings, numbered highest to lowest. And in this chart you see the radiations and Beelzebub's tales, cosmoses, and In Search of the Miraculous, cosmoses. And you can see how they match up. So in BT 38, 727, being ambelazoin is the blood of the being body, Kesjan. So 5, and Gurdjieff has ambledazoin for tetatocosmos man, but I've changed it to hemoglobazoin because in BT 39 764, and so my boy, when similar coatings of previously coated tetatocosmoses were completed and began to function correspondingly, then from that time they ceased calling them tetatocosmoses and began to call these beings, which then meant two-natured, and these second coatings began to be called bodies Keston. So really, Ambletothoin belongs as 6 in the middle cosmos, the mesocosmos, all planets where Keston bodies live. So BT 39, 765. From the most holy Thermurtamagalogus, the similarities of the third kind began to be coded, and in them were the higher sacred parts of beings, which we now call higher being bodies. And then 7, Palotheopal, which was left out, microcosmos' all suns, galaxy, souls. And this would be macrocosmos, the large cosmos, galaxy, Milky Way. In Search of the Miraculous, chapter 11, page 220. In so-called occult literature, you have probably met with the expression Kundalini, the fire of Kundalini, or the serpent of Kundalini. The expression is often used to designate some kind of strange force which is present in man and which can be awakened. But none of the known theories gives the right explanation of the force of Kundalini. Sometimes it is connected with sex energy, and that with the idea of the possibility of using sex energy for other purposes. The latter is surely wrong because Kundalini can be in anything, and above all, Kundalini is not anything desirable or useful for man's development. It is very curious how these occultists have got hold of the word from somewhere, but have completely altered its meaning, and from it a very dangerous and terrible thing have made something to be hoped for and to be awaited as some blessing. In reality, Kundalini is the power of imagination, the power of fantasy, which takes the place of a real function. When a man dreams instead of acting, when his dreams take the place of reality, when a man assigns himself to be an eagle, a lion, or a magician, it is the force of Kundalini acting in him. Kundalini can act in all centers, and with the help of the centers can be satisfied with the imaginary. A sheep which considers itself a lion or a magician lives under the power of Kundalini. Kundalini is a force put into man in order to keep them in their present state. If man could really see their true position and could understand all the horror of it, they would be unable to remain where they are even for a second. They would begin to seek a way out and would quickly find it, because there is a way out, but man failed to see it simply because they are hypnotized. Kundalini is a force that keeps them in a hypnotic state. To awaken for man means to be dehypnotized. In this lies the chief difficulty, and this also lies the guarantee of its possibility. For there is no organic reason for sleep, and man can awake. So this section on Gurdjieff talks about how he has turned Kundalini into Kundabuffer. Gurdjieff uses the metaphor of Kundalini and calls it Kundabuffer, which was placed into humans by the archangels and later removed, leaving a predisposition towards its effect. BT 10, 88-89, Why Men Are Not Men. The sacred members of this most holy High Commission then reasoned that if the said mechanical instinct of these biped, three-brained beings of that planet should develop towards the attainment of objective reason, as always occurs everywhere among three-brained beings, that it might quite possibly happen that they would prematurely comprehend the real cause of their arising and existence and make a great deal of trouble. It might happen that having understood the reason for their arising, namely that by their existence they should maintain the detached fragments of their planet, and being convinced of this, their slavery to circumstances utterly foreign to them, they would be unwilling to continue their existence, and would on principle destroy themselves. And so, my boy, in view of this, the Most High Commission then decided, among other things provisionally, to implant in the common presences of the three-brained beings there a special orb with a property which that, first, they should perceive reality topsy-turvy, and secondly, that every repeated impression from outside should crystallize in them data which would engender factors for evoking in them sensations of pleasure and enjoyment. And then, in fact, with the help of the chief common universal alchemist physicist Angel Louisius, who was also among the members of the Most High Commission, they caused to grow in the three brain beings there in a special way, the base of their spinal column at the root of their tail, which they also still had at that time, still had in which part their common presence is furthermore, still had in its normal exterior expressing what is to say the fullness of its inner significance, a something which assisted the arising of the said properties in them, and this something they first called the organ Kundabhava. So this inspired my lecture. The soul is sex, but sex is not soul. Gurdjieff's invention of Kundabhava and its relation to the limbic system. So in Ouspensky chapter 12 and 13 are skipped because they're non-specific. So chapter 14 in Ouspensky, Gurdjieff shows how to construct the Enneagram. All our ordinary knowledge, which is based on ordinary observation, he called subjective. Knowledge based upon ancient methods, knowledge of the all, he called objective knowledge. One of the most central ideas of objective knowledge is the idea of the unity of everything, of the unity in diversity. With objective consciousness, it is possible to see and feel the unity of everything. Page 279. Myths are designed to transmit ideas to the higher emotional center. Symbols are designed for the higher thinking center. Page 280. Symbols were divided into the fundamental and the subordinate, and the first included the principles of separate domains of knowledge. The second expressed the essential nature of phenomenon in their relation to unity. One formula which had particular significance, as above so below, can from the emerald tables of Hermes Trismegistus. This formula stated that all the laws of the cosmos should be found in the atom or in any other phenomenon which exists as something completed according to certain laws. Page 281. Man must first see the manifestation of two principles, one opposed to the other and in conjunction or in opposition, and give one result or another. He will introduce the line of will in the circle of time and afterwards into the circle of eternity. When this is accomplished, it will create in him the great symbol known as the Seal of Solomon. A symbol becomes a synthesis of a man's knowledge. Page 281. Man in the normal state, natural to him, taken as a duality. He consists entirely of pairs of opposites, positive and negative, useful and harmful, good and bad, pleasant and unpleasant, thoughts oppose feelings, moving impulses oppose instinctive craving for quiet. Page 282. The creation of a permanent third principle is for man the transformation of duality into the Trinity. Man has 5 centers: thinking, emotional, moving, instinctive, and sex. If man brings the work of these 5 centers into harmonious accord, he locks the pentagram within him and becomes a finished type of the physically perfect man. When man becomes directly and permanently connected with objective consciousness and objective knowledge, the man becomes the 6-point star, the Seal of Solomon. A symbol can never be fully interpreted. It can only be experienced. Page 283. The law of octaves gives another system of symbols. Every completed process is a transition of the note do through a series of successive tones to the do of the next octave. The 7 fundamental tones of the octave express the law of 7. The 7 fundamental tones, the 2 intervals or shocks, and the do of the next octave generate 10 steps, the decimal system of numbers. Page 283. The symbology of number is based on this idea. In theosophical addition, the definition of a number consisting of more than 1 digit is the sum of the 2 digits, casting out 9s. Numbers are connected with definite geometrical figures in the Kabbalah. A symbology of letters and a symbology of words are used. There also exists a symbology of magic, a symbology of alchemy, a symbology of astrology. A symbol can never be taken in a final and definite meaning. Page 284. Exact knowledge concerning details communicated to a man before he has acquired an understanding of the essential nature of a thing makes it difficult for him to understand this essential nature. A man will attain knowledge only by his own efforts. No one can give him what he did not possess before. No one can do for him the work he should do for himself. Page 285. The law of octaves connects all processes of the universe, and it presents the possibility of an exact cognition of every phenomenon in its essential nature. The symbol which unifies the idea of the octave is a circle divided into 9 equal parts, with lines connecting the 9 points on the circumference in a certain order. The symbol takes the following form. Page 287. The symbol Enneagram expresses the law of 7 in its union with the law of 3. The octave possesses 7 tones, and the 8th is a repetition of the first. 2 additional shocks fill the intervals Mi, Fa, and Si, Do, so that there are 9 elements. Page 288. The circle symbolizes an uninterrupted flowing process. The separate points of the division of the circumference symbolize the steps of the process. The symbol as a whole is Do. It is a circle, the completed circle, the 0 of our decimal system. The stages in the process are connected with the remaining numbers 1 through 9. Every beginning and ending of the cycle is situated in the apex of the triangle. Since it is the 9th step, closes and begins the cycle, the upper point of the triangle corresponds to the number 9. Page 289. We must take a unit and divide it into 7 equal parts. These decimal divisions generate a series of fractions which consist of exactly the same 6 digits in a definite sequence. If you know the first digit of the period, it is possible to reconstruct the whole period of the fractions, which are as follows. So they're showing 1 divided by 7, 2 divided by 7, 3 divided by 7, 4 divided by 7, 5 divided by 7, 6 divided by 7, and then 7 divided by 7, they're saying is basically 1. But then if you look at the digits, the 1 divided by 7, it goes 1/4, 2, 8, 5, 7. So page 289, if we start from the first number in a fraction and connect in sequence to the remaining numbers on the fraction, we shall obtain a figure found inside the circle. For example, we will follow the digits 1/7. We start at 1 in the circle and connect to 4, then to 2, then to 8, then to 5, and finally to 7. The final step would be connected to the 7 back to the 1. The numbers 3, 6, and 9 are not included in the period. They form a separate triangle, the free trinity of the symbol. Page 289. The divisions of the circle are also related to the notes and intervals in an octave. Page 307. A balanced process cannot be changed at any moment it is desired. It can be changed and set on a new path only at certain crossroads. In the law of octaves, these crossroads are called the intervals Mi, Fa, and Si, Do. Page 291. The distribution we get can give the following grouping: Si, Do, Re, Sol, X, La, and Mi, X, Fa. Page 284. Each completed whole, each cosmos, each organism, each plant is an enneagram. The inner triangle stands for the presence of higher elements. The enneagram is a universal symbol of all knowledge and can be included in the enneagram. The enneagram is perpetual motion and is also the philosopher's stone of the alchemists. Page 296. There are two kinds of art, objective art and subjective art. In subjective art, everything is accidental. I measure the merit of the art by its consciousness. Page 297. Objective music is all based on inner octaves. It can obtain definite psychological and physical results. Such music can freeze water and can kill a man. The music used to destroy the walls of Jericho was objective music. So, constructing the Gurdjieff Enneagram, you use a mathematically elegant process. And here it is. Mark 9 points in a circle numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with 9 at the top. Divide the numbers 1 through 6 by 7 for the law of sevenfoldness. 1 divided by 7, 2 divided by 7, 3 divided by 7, 4 divided by 7, 5 divided by 6 divided by 7. And then this gives a decimal number. And you'll see that these results contain the same repeating decimal. So now if you draw a line connecting these numbers on the circle, you note that the repeating decimal numbers, when added together, equal 9. So that gives you the 9 at the top of the Enneagram. The missing numbers 3, 6, 9 can then be connected to form an inner triangle with its apex at the top. Thus the famous symbol appears. We will see that vortex math has a similar triangle where 3 and 9 constantly swap places. So here's the correspondence to a piano. More important, the assignment of the 7 positions of the octave is as follows. Re is position 1, mi to position 2, fa to position 4, sol to position 5, la to position 7, and ti to position 8. The apex of the triangle at 9 is then do, to represent the lower do and its completion at the higher do. Thus the Gurdjieff Enneagram incorporates the law of 7, heptaparapashnak, the law of 3, triya masakamno, and the law of ninefoldness, the sacred law of 6, the inner lines, and the line of 12, the intersection of these lines with the inner triangle. And there you can see the figure drawn. And here is the Gurdjieff Enneagram that shows all possible lines within it in yellow and green, and the notes assigned. Then you could see my essay, The Secret Enneagram of Gurdjieff and its Relationship to Universal Vortex Math. Gurdjieff talks of the fact that numbers are connected with definite geometrical figures. In the Kabbalah, a symbol of letters and a symbology of words are used. There also exists a symbology of magic, symbology of alchemy, and a symbology of astrology. And then you could see my essay, Placing the Major Arcana cards of the Tarot on the Kabbalah, which also corrects the upside-down order, finding the engine of Sephirah that bridges the discontinuities of the Gurdjieff Enneagram. And here it is. You'll notice that this is the Kabbalah, and I've reversed it left to right because I feel that Eastern philosophy is written right to left and ours is written left to right. So I swapped the Kabbalah here and I think it fits better. And then I assign all the tarot cards to the different sections. And contrary to those who have developed the tarot cards, they actually have them backwards, because you'll notice that the Joker is at the top in theirs, and in mine it's at the bottom. And obviously, to be the Joker is not the goal of the steps in the tarot cards. So obviously, the Joker is in the lowest position in the Kabbalah. So now we're in chapter 15 in Ouspensky, page 299. Religion is a relative concept. It corresponds to the level of a man's being. Religion is doing. A man should live his religion. Man should think about what God is and what he is. One should think about what God is and what he is. These thoughts do for him what he asks God to do. The Christian church is a school. Prehistoric Egypt was Christian many thousands of years before the birth of Christ. Schools of repetition were taken as a model for the Christian churches. Page 308. Every religion consists of two parts. One part teaches what is to be done, the other part teaches how to do what it first teaches. This part is preserved in secret in special schools. The secret part exists in Christianity. Page 305. One must learn to pray, just as one must learn everything else. Whoever knows how to pray and is able to concentrate in the proper way, his prayer can give results. Organic life transmits planetary influences of various kinds to the earth, and it serves to feed the moon and to enable it to grow and strengthen. But the earth is also growing in the sense of greater consciousness, greater receptivity. Page 306. The cessation of evolution may mean the destruction of humanity. Humanity is moving in a circle. In one century, it destroys everything it created in another. The growth of knowledge in one domain evokes the growth of ignorance in the other. Page 309. The whole of humanity is composed of 7 concentric circles. The inner circle, the esoteric, consists of people who have attained the highest development possible for man. The next outer circle, the mesoteric, is the middle circle. The third circle is called the exoteric, and there also exists an outermost circle. Page 312. There are 4 ways to enter the innermost circle. The way of the fakir, the physical body. The way of the monk, the religious way. The way of the yogi, the way of the mind. And the 4th way, the way of work. And this is, of course, the well-known method from Ouspensky. Page 314. Transitions from one level of being to another were marked by ceremonies of presentations of special kind, that is, initiation. But a change of being cannot be brought about by any rites. Page 315. Systems and schools can indicate methods and ways, but no system or school whatever can do for man the work that he must do himself. Inner growth, a change of being, depends entirely upon the work which man must do on himself. So in Gurdjieff, the 4 paths of perfection, Beelzebub's tales does not mention, but does meet these teachers in meetings with remarkable men. Those who mention these 4 paths are Ouspensky followers. The way of the fakir, the physical body, meetings with remarkable men, that would be chapter 8. The way of the monk, the religious way, would be meetings with remarkable men, chapter 10. The way of the yogi, the way of the mind, is meetings with remarkable men, chapter 9. And the 4th way is the way of the work. The 4th way is sometimes called the way of the sly man. The sly man knows some secret which the fakir, monk, and yogi do not know. How the sly man learned this secret is not known. Perhaps he found it in some old books. Perhaps he inherited it. Perhaps he bought it. Perhaps he stole it from someone. It makes no difference. The sly man knows the secret. With his help outstrips the fakir, the monk, and the yogi. Of the 4, the fakir acts in the crudest manner. He knows very little, understands very little. Let us suppose that by the whole month of intense torture, he develops in himself a certain energy, substance, which produces certain changes in him. He does it absolutely blindly, with his eyes shut, knowing neither aim, methods, nor results, simply an imitation of others. The monk knows what he wants a little better. He is guided by religious feeling, by religious tradition, and by a desire for achievement, for salvation. He trusts his teacher, who tells him what to do, and he believes that his efforts and sacrifices are pleasing to God. Let us suppose that a week of fasting, continual prayer, privations, and so on, enables him to attain what the fakir develops in himself by a month of self-torture. The yogi knows considerably more. He knows what he wants. He knows why he wants it. He knows how it can be acquired. He knows, for instance, that it is necessary for his purpose to produce a certain substance in himself. He knows that this substance can be produced in one day by a certain kind of mental exercises or concentration of consciousness. So he keeps his attention on these exercises for a whole day without allowing himself a single outside thought, and he obtains what he needs. In this way, a yogi spends on the same thing only one day compared with a month spent by the fakir and a week spent by the monk. But on the fourth way, knowledge is still more exact and perfect. A man who follows the fourth way knows quite definitely what substances he needs for his aims, and he knows that these substances, by a month of physical suffering, and by a week of emotional strain, or by a day of mental exercises, and also that they can be introduced in the organism from without if it is known how to do it. And so instead of spending a whole day in exercises like the yogi, a week in prayer like the monk, or a month in self-torture like the fakir, he simply prepares and swallows a little pill which contains all the substances. Here I have offered a prayer that is in line with the Gurdjieff work. Prayer to the Triune God. Page 40. A man who attained the full development possible for man consists of four bodies: physical body, which could be related to a carriage; astral body, the emotions, to a horse; mental body, the mind, the driver; the causal body, to the master, the driver. The hackneyed cab illustration is often used to illustrate In Search of the Miraculous, Figure 1, showing the four bodies that were just discussed here. The first body, the carnal body, is the carriage, the body, the physical body. The second body, the natural body, is the horse, feelings, desires, astral body. The third body, spiritual body, the driver, is the mind, the mental body. The fourth body is the divine body, master, I, consciousness, will, causal body. This figure is deceptive, as man can only possess three bodies: physical, astral, Kesjan, and soul. The so-called causal body is the body that is in the title of Gurdjieff's unfinished third book, All and Everything. Life is real only then when I am. It is not a fourth body. To have a second body, an astral body, is to have conscience, and to have a third body is a soul, is to have consciousness. This balance can be disrupted by the influence of the organ Kundabuffer that was placed in man and then removed, leaving a predisposition to it. Kundabuffer is the limbic system, and the horse needs to be controlled by understanding, gnosis. So in Beelzebub's Tales 21, 241, one of the best means of rendering ineffective the predisposition present in our nature of the crystallization of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer is intentional suffering, and the greatest intentional suffering can be obtained in your presences if you compel yourself to be able to endure the displeasing manifestations of others towards yourselves. So here we are in Ouspensky's chapter 16, page 316. Everything happens. No one does anything. The human mind is incapable of even realizing its own helplessness. Page 316. The density of vibrations and the density of matter express many other properties of matter. The speed of vibration shows the intelligence of the consciousness of matter. There is nothing dead or inanimate in nature. Page 320. In ordinary science, classification is made according to external traits, bones, teeth, and so on. In exact knowledge, classification is made according to cosmic traits. The cosmic level of being is determined by, number 1, what the creature eats, what he breathes, the medium in which he lives. A man cannot improve on his food or air, but he can improve on his impressions. Page 329. A breath is 3 seconds in a normal state. A man takes about 20 full breaths in a minute. The breath of organic life is 24 hours. Breath, day and night life. Small cells, 3 seconds. Large cells, 3 seconds, 24 hours. Man, 3 seconds, 24 hours, 79 years. Organic life, 24 hours, 79 years, 2,500,000 years. Earth, 79 years, 2,500,000 years, 75 billion years. Now, in the Search of the Miraculous diagram, figure 58, who eats what and what is eaten actually contains a mistake, and I'm showing the corrected version here. The mistake is in terms of what is eaten. That's the top right circle, and the bottom right circle is what it eats. For instance, in the square of man, angels eat man, and man eats vertebrates. And then in the area of angels or the spirit, angels eat man. What was wrong is that angels eat vertebrates. Other than that, this diagram is very illuminating. The diagram of everything existing is in my essay, Photonic Soul Beyond Gurdjieff. So figure 58 shows a circle to the left, which was the average of man, angels, archangels. Then on the top right was a circle that represented what was the food for, and the bottom right was what its food was. It's a humorous thought to think that the mistake says that man's food is invertebrates, in other words, locusts. Perhaps the vegetarians made this change. And I use this diagram to support my addition of the Ankhlad body, based on the absolute reason of his endlessness himself, which mirrors Beelzebub's tales, the inevitable result of impartial mentation. Chapter 47, page 1177. So now chapter 17 and 18 in Ouspensky are non-specific. And thus ends this essay, comparing P.D. Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous to G.I. Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. I'm hoping that this essay will demonstrate the fact that Beelzebub's Tales is the correct version of Gurdjieff's philosophy, but also to demonstrate that In Search of the Miraculous is useful in correcting some of Gurdjieff's errors.